How's everybody doing? My name is Ameer. I am a product manager. I focus more on Duet for developers. So I'm going to kind of take us a little bit more high level. And I really just want to show you how customers actually use this. So I'm going to spend very little time on slides. I actually wanted to do 0 slides, but I think it's important to kind of close the loop. So when it comes to AI for GCP and for developers, we sort of kind of divide the whole thing into 2 groups. On the left-hand side, you have Google's AI solutions for consumers. So you may have heard of Gemini, formerly known as Bard, or MakerSuite, or Palm API, or Workspace. All of that falls on the left-hand side. And then we have Duet AI for enterprises. And then within the enterprises, we kind of divide that into these 2 sort of categories. And I think somebody asked that question, where does Vertex fall in? So Vertex is a set of tools and a platform where you can build your own models, you can extend them, you can tune them, you can serve them, and it has everything from the ground up, from foundational models to infrastructure, CPUs, TPUs, GPUs, all of those things. So it's for expert practitioners if you want to build your own Gen AI apps. And then on the right-hand side is Duet AI, which is what I focus on, which is stuff that we've built on top of our foundational models that you can just consume value directly. And I just want to kind of quickly show you what we do there. So essentially, if you look at just the comprehensive offerings of AI that we provide, anywhere from data scientists and app builders, what we focus on, and when we look at all the industries that Gen AI is going to affect, and these were all the icons that I could find, so I just slapped them on there. But you can see that one of them is missing. We ourselves is part of that industry. I mean, we provide cloud services. So how do we use Gen AI to enhance cloud services? And that's kind of where I focus on, which is users that are actually using the cloud. So that could be operators who are building applications, deploying applications, running applications, as well as developers who are coding applications. How do we build solutions for them to consume value right away? So very quickly, this is sort of a layer cake. I don't know if you went through this, Brandon. I can't remember. I don't think so. Okay. So very bottom, I think you've talked about the foundational models. I'm not gonna harp on that. On top of that, we build APIs. So we have the infrastructure to tune, train those foundational models, and then we build APIs like Palm and Cody, you may have heard of. Then we ground them with our own GCP expertise. Some of this I'll show you today. You can bring your own organizational knowledge. So when we talk to customers, they want to bring their own knowledge, whether through RAG or fine tuning. And then this last yellow layer is what I'm going to demo, which is what does the user experience or the UX looks like for consumers of Duet AI. And this is where we focus on the practitioners of cloud and which surfaces they go on. So things like the IDE or things like the Cloud Console, maybe observability tooling and stuff like that. So I'll show you a few of those things today. The cloud products are continuing to grow. When I joined like 7 years ago at Google, there were a lot less products than there are today. And we just continue to proliferate more and more products. So in some cases, cloud has become easier, but in other cases, onboarding to the cloud and moving to the cloud and digital transformation is becoming harder and harder. So what we are really focused on is how do we make cloud easier, and how can we use Duet or Gen AI to be able to do that. And when we look at a very small subset of the cloud users, which are developers themselves, and this is what I focus on, is how do we make developer productivity better, increase developer productivity. A lot of the times when you're a new developer to a company, not that you're a new developer, when you're new to a company, the onboarding is a lot slower. You have to figure out what the existing code looks like. You're constantly switching context. You're looking at online for code samples and such. You're trying to understand the code. Tech debt is a huge tax on new code. So when we're looking at how do we deliver software delivery faster, how do we make software delivery faster, that's usually a challenge. And nobody likes writing unit tests and repetitive tasks. So how can we make those boilerplate things a lot easier? And I'm just going to build this out real quick because this is easy. A lot of the times we get into the minutia and the science of how Gen AI works, but I think sometimes if we just kind of park that to a side and we just think of what we're trying to accomplish, the business outcomes have really not changed. These things predate any IT technology, right? This is what we want to accomplish. And when you start with that and you just start kind of moving backwards, at Google, what we believe is in order to accomplish these business outcomes, you need to build what we're calling modern applications. It's a pretty loosey-goosey terms, but modern applications typically have these 3 traits. They're dynamic. They can move with the user's ability, user's features a lot quicker. You can release new features a lot faster. They're scalable and performant, right? So they meet the user's need, right? Google Search is an example of that. YouTube is an example of that, where you can scale to many, many, many billions of users. And they're intelligent. They use, large swaths of data to build intelligent features within the apps themselves. And in order to measure this, and this is a nod to DORA. I don't know if you've heard of DORA. DORA it stands for DevOps Research and Assessment. So it is a community of practitioners that really focus on how to make software delivery lifecycle better and performant. And they really focus on improving throughput and stability. And there are specifically these 4 key metrics that they look at. What is the lead time to change? How quickly can I get change into production? What is my throughput, which is the deployment frequency? How often do I fail when I push a new change into production, and how quickly can I recover these things, right? So we've done many, many research around this.
Nothing about severity of incidents or anything of that nature?
Sorry, nothing about severity?
Of incidents?
Yeah, there is debate and about, whether these are the 4 key principles that we should be looking at and 4 key metrics. One thing I would say that this, at Google, we do look at these things, and there's a lot more to DORA than just this, and which is why I have this last thing, because it's very hard to sort of metrically measure developer productivity. A lot of these things can be gamed and such and such. There's another acronym called SPACE or SPACES. I don't know if you've heard of that. I think it came out of GitHub, and it talks about this idea of developer satisfaction and flow. There are some sort of subjective sort of things here on what it means for developers to do that. So you have to mix kind of these empirical things that software delivery performance provide, and then developer productivity to figure out what solution is working better.
My feelings back.
Lots of numbers. The main thing to kind of take out of this is that when we think of code generation, that's not the only thing in the software delivery lifecycle. There's a lot of other things that developers also want to do, that nobody wants to document code, so that's another use case. Testing code is a big one. Deployment and monitoring is a huge use case. That's 45% of developers want that. So a lot of the times when we think of developer productivity, immediately just think of writing lines of code. This is a big part of it, and I'll show you that too, but there's other things that we're also focused on. And when you look at the...
What was the source of that data? Was that a big survey? I think it had 39,000, I'm assuming that is. I can't quite see, but...
Let me just... Stack Overflow, apparently.
Gotcha.
Oh, it's a Stack Overflow survey. Okay.
Yeah. There's other ones too, but I think this was the one that I've been using. Hopefully everybody's seen this. So this is the software delivery lifecycle loop. So, and the idea is that the quicker you can go around this lap, the faster you can produce new features, right? So the first time you go through this, you realize like what needs to be improved, and you feed that into the second one, and then that's what we're trying to improve. And we believe that Duet improves almost individually each stage, from designing, and I'll show you some of that. So this is like generating API specs or generating data models, the building, which is the actual software, generating unit tests, figuring out which infrastructure to put your stuff on, fixing errors and those types of things, and even helping with how to containerize things and how to put this on Kubernetes. Here are some of the things that were sort of the themes for 2024. I think this will be better shown, but the idea is that obviously we're focused on code generation, which is what I'll show you, but also code transformation, right? So this is, how do I take code from one language, convert it to another? How do we put more customer information inside the context? Context I'll talk about quite a bit when we show the demo. How do we make it safer to use? How do we get the provenance of the code? Where was it generated? What prompt was put in? So basically an audit history of exactly what was put in, what was accepted, what was not accepted, those types of things. And then being able to provide enterprises kind of fine-grained control, not just a dashboard of who's using this and how much are they using and all those sort of fancy things, but also controls over what can people do. Can people use licensed code and those types of things? So there's a lot going on there. Okay, I'm going to switch to the demo. Very quickly, I just want to kind of show a couple of things. I think I'm going to sit down for a second here. It'd be easier for me to type stuff. So there are 2 things that I just kind of very quickly talk about, 2 surfaces, right? So this is what the Google Cloud Console looks like. And once you enable Duet, the idea is that you can open up this sort of an assistant chat window to the side, and you can start asking questions right away. That's one way of doing it. So operators that spend time in the console can use that. From a developer standpoint, and there's a slew of IDEs that we support, I'm just using Cloud Shell Editor, which is basically a VS Code style IDE, which is very common. And that's just built into Cloud Shell, so I didn't need to install anything, but the experience will be identical. And it's got the same icon for Duet, and I can just open that, and I can just start asking questions. So I can even, and to the point of having Duet be trained and grounded on GCP knowledge. So I can say something like, how do I run a container on GCP? Something like that, right? And then it should start giving me GCP specific answers, right? So here's a container image, blah, blah, blah. You can upload it to either container registry or artifact registry, which is our container registries. And through gcloud or console, you can run this. I can give it further prompts. So I can copy this and I can say, how do I run container on GCP on GKE, which is Google's Kubernetes engine, right? Since Brandon, you love GKE, I'm adding GKE on there. And then it tells you, like, you can create a GKE cluster, then you can get credentials, and then you can do a kubectl run, right? So it gives you stuff around that. Another thing it can do is, like I mentioned, it's really good at generating API specs. So instead of me just typing prompts, I'm just going to copy some of them just so you can kind of see and we can read them. So I'm going to copy this prompt and then we'll read what it says. So it basically just says, generate an open API spec for a service that provides shipping and package information. Make this a little bit bigger. To include packages height, width, depth, weight, and any special handling instructions. A simple API spec. So here's the packages spec, product ID, gets in a product ID, and then it generates those 4 properties or 5 properties that I asked for: height, width, weight. Right, this almost works 100% of the time. I've never seen it not work. And a lot of the times this is either given to you or you'll start with that. So the narrative here is that I'm a developer and I'm part of this e-commerce company, and the company is spending way too much money on shipping. I don't know if you guys have ever received an Amazon box that's like this big, but it had something that was this small. And so we want to lower the shipping costs, and then they realize, well, when we send information to the shipping department, we're not giving them the packages, dimensions and stuff like that. So I, as a developer, am responsible for building a quick service that basically, in addition to giving which product we're shipping, it also gives them the dimensions and stuff like that. So that's sort of the quick app that I'm going to build here. So I've already built this API spec, and then just for the sake of time, I've also built the data model. Everything I built actually using Duet AI, it'll just take me a lot longer to show this. The data model is basically that API spec in Python that just converts it to a Python data model, right? So this class package has those same thing. It takes in a product ID and has height, width, depth, weight, right? And then I'm using a Google-specific database. So I'm using Cloud SQL, which is a Google resource. And I want to use that because I want to show how it's grounded with Google's knowledge. And this particular file, all it does is it just connects to the Cloud SQL database. And then so I can interact with it. I can get product ID, I can give it a product ID and it can give me the information, or I can write to it. But we don't need to go through how it works, but essentially what this file does. But just know that it's using a very Google-specific library. And this is part of, if I'm a developer new to this company, I need to be able to sort of understand how this works. So let's just generate sort of a main file, right? So I'm going to start with a very simple prompt. So I'm just going to generate a Python Flask app that basically just creates a service, right? So if I go to this API spec, I'm just going to type this, and I'm just saying, using the Python Flask library, create an implementation that uses HTTP REST endpoints for this service. So this is where context is important. Context is anything I type in the chat window, as well as any file that I have open. So in this case, I have the package service.yaml API spec open.
Duet AI is using Gemini?
Yes. So in this particular case, I'm using package service.yaml. And the reason I paused is because I thought you asked Gemini Pro, and I don't think it's using Gemini Pro yet. But yeah, Gemini. And if we look at this code, so I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger. It actually did pretty well, right? So it's using a Flask library. It's creating a Flask app. It's creating a route, which is packages/product ID, which it got from up here. Then it didn't really generate a function for me to get the product. That's fine. My prompt was not very contextually rich, I guess. And then it returns a product and blah, 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 right? And it runs the app. So it's giving me sort of the shell of a service. So this is where it's important to know how to talk to Duet, right? This is sort of a effective prompting is sort of a transient skill right now. I liken this to search maybe 20 years ago, where search was kind of a skill. Now search has become a lot more forgiving. You can just type something, it'll even autocomplete for you. And most of the time, the first thing is right. But back in the day, you had to kind of know how to search for things and you had to research for things. I think prompting is kind of there. Hopefully it'll become much more
How
forgiving.
many
I don't think it'll
languages
take 20
does
years.
Duet support?
Sorry?
How many programming languages does it support? I mean, Python, YAML, obviously.
Python, YAML,
C, C++,
Java,
Java,
JavaScript. Those
JavaScript.
are the few that I go. Yeah, there's quite a few. I don't have the full list in my head.
Rust.
Rust, I believe so. Yeah. Another way we can check it is if I go into, oops, that's the
Why
wrong.
shouldn't we just ask Duet?
We can ask it. Let's ask it. How many programming languages do you support? Let's see. I don't know if it's going to hallucinate.
Fortran,
Oh, there you go.
RPG2.
Yep,
Rust
C++,
and
more.
Java,
And more. Okay.
and more.
Well, it could be anything.
So it's
It could be Objective-C.
yeah,
VB
and
script.
COBOL.
COBOL.
COBOL, yeah.
IBM's not.
Somebody was gonna
COBOL.
bring that up.
RPG.
I'm going to give it a little bit more in-depth prompt. So another thing is this trash can button is your friend. And the reason I say that is because Duet or any LLM doesn't know how to not do something. You have to tell it what to do. So you can't just say, hey, forget it. I give an example of, I don't know if everybody's playing Pictionary, right? Where you get a word and you have to draw a diagram. And you start with something very simple. Could be something like the prompt that I just gave it. And then you start adding to it. You start giving it more context. And then at some point, you're veering it way too off, right? And nobody's guessing it. And then you just forget and you just delete the picture and you say, let me start again. That's kind of what this trash can does, right?
So it modifies or deletes stuff out of context.
So it deletes basically the context.
Of the last.
By the way, I asked Gemini how many languages the Duet support. Is 20. And it gives a list all 20.
So I want to really quickly talk about what prompt I gave it this time. So this time I said using the Python Flask library, create an implementation. But then this time I said also import the package, which was the data model, from the data model py file, as well as the session maker from the connect connector file. So if you remember, I had this data model file where I need this package, and then I have this connect the connector file where, towards the end, I have the session maker. This is how I connect to the database. So I've given it a lot more context, and now that you can see that it's actually doing something a lot more. So now it is actually pulling package from the data model file. It is also pulling the session maker from the connect connector file. It's creating a session. It's now, let me just make this a little bit bigger. It's now actually querying that session, querying the database, filtering it by the product ID, which I would give it, right? And then it's returning that product. If it doesn't get the product, it will give me a nice message in a 404. Otherwise, it will return the product as dictionary, right? So that's sort of the kind of the main file. So I am going to give it one last prompt because what I want to do is I want to run this app as host 100, and we don't need to worry about it, but just for the sake of completion, I want to give it this last prompt. I'm going to say use host IP 0000 for app.run. It's just a Python thing. It's just the way it runs on Kubernetes. Okay, so same exact thing that we just kind of did. This time it added this sort of a code for it. Otherwise, it's pretty much the same.
Can you get it to generate files based on the output automatically? Or is it now constantly a copy and paste type?
Yeah, so actually, I'm glad you asked that question. So there are 3 ways to do it. You can copy it to a clipboard and then just paste it. You can create a file, like this is just an empty file that I had open. I can just hit this plus button, it would just move the stuff over. Or I can just open it in a new file, which is these diagonal arrows, and that will just basically open a new buffer and basically copy all the contents over. So you can, those are sort of the main 3 ways to do it. And then once you have it, you can just kind of save it. Just save it as main.py, and it's good to go.
So if you made an error with this, let's say you modified one of the parameters or something like that, would Duet be able to diagnose the error and fix it? Or
yeah, it can. And I'll actually show you that here in a little bit. As a matter of fact, this file won't work. I can already see some challenges like this. This is wrong. So yeah, so for example, here so I've just saved this as a main file. So let me just run this. And it's at least running the Flask app. But if I try to perlit. So I'm just going to open a new terminal, and I'm going to try to hit that endpoint. So it's localhost on port 5001, and you can see that I've got this internal error. Now I can go back, and it'll say, and then this is where you have to also figure out, do you want to just keep asking Duet, or do you just kind of understand what it's telling you? So for example, if I go, and you can do both, right? It doesn't like this package.toDictionary because there's no function or there's no method called toDictionary for package, right? And it even tells you this down here. Or to your point, I could, let's say I don't know what that means. I can just copy this, and then I can go back to Duet, clean this, and I can just say explain this, error, for example. Yeah, the package object has no occurs because the toDictionary method has not been defined in the package class. To fix this, you need to add this, and it tells you where to do it. So again, I would have to go into this data model file and then fix it here, right? So you can either, kind of go back and forth and iterate it, and it will point you in the right direction. So like here, it tells you like you can just add this thing, and it will just return exactly what you were looking for.
God, I wanted this when I was coding Rust.
Sorry?
I wanted this when I needed this for Rust.
Yeah, I have not. So I'm
understand.
barely a Python guy. So
I
I'm
do
not-
Python too, and there's plenty of bugs
Yeah.
there too as well. So I'm a.
How does the licensing work?
Sorry?
The licensing, is it per user?
Yeah.
That's unlimited Gemini usage, or
No,
is
actually,
it
let
per
me
use?
create something that actually generates a license so you can see it. That's a really good one. So I'm going to take this data model, and I'm going to generate. I've already pre-generated this connector file, but I'm going to regenerate it because I know that this one actually takes some cited code. So I am going to go back to my prompts, and then I'm going to say this prompt, and I can explain this prompt, but this is exactly the prompt I used to generate that file. So I'm going to go back to the prompt, and basically the prompt just says, hey, use this library to generate a connection, which generates basically the same file that you saw. I'm going to move this file into, just an open empty file, and I'm going to close everything so you can kind of see. Now you'll see a bunch of these squigglies, right? And if I just hover over this, it will tell you that, use with caution, this code was found somewhere on GitHub, and it tells you the link exactly where it was found. And you can either view the problem or you can quick fix it, and you can ignore citation, and then those squiggly lines would go away. We're also adding a feature where you can just say never use cited code.
Yeah.
Otherwise, again, this is where the provenance, the code provenance thing helps, which is essentially, I don't know what the exact UX is going to look like, but imagine a dot folder that will maintain all of the audit history of exactly what was prompted, what was accepted, what was not accepted. We're also going to use that for reinforced learning. So in this case, if I don't accept something, it will learn that very quickly, and it will say, okay, don't give the next user that sort of.
That would have been a really good question about the software licensing. I meant more the user licensing from how much does it cost for me as a developer to consume this, and is there any limitation on Gemini with the Duet chat, or is it like usage based?
No, I don't think it's usage based. I think it's just per user per month.
Cool.
Type of a
Unlimited kind of code
model.
generation.
What was it? 20 per month, I think, per user. I mean, that's the list.
Amir, did you say Duet does reinforcement learning on my coding style and tries to?
Not yet, but that is on the roadmap. Yes, but that's what you just said is exactly what we're doing, is that it will learn your style of prompting. I think this is where things get a lot more forgiving, because right now it's just based on sort of the foundational model. We're also adding RAG, retrieval augmentation generation, which is where you can say, take this entire repo, and then I'm going to ask you to do something. And then it would be a lot more. So currently, for example, the context is just limited to what I have open, and it's just limited to my session. And if I clear it, then everything just gets forgotten. But in the future, that feature is very heavily recommended, is that, hey, I want this to recognize my code and not just generic stuff. And then so that is coming very, 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 very soon. Another thing is I'm going to go back to the main file. So I wanted to show a couple of things. So I can select any piece of text and that becomes a context. So in this particular file, for example, this line is very interesting to me. How does it get the package? And you'll see this little light bulb comes up. And when the light bulb comes up, I can have some smart actions, right? So these are sort of pre-created prompts that we think people use. So for example, here I can just say, explain this. Explain this is first of all, it does a fairly good job explaining this. So I basically said, explain this line to me. So the query method queries the query object, filters it by the product ID that you've provided. Use this for commenting, also use this for code reviews. Another thing it does is you can generate code. So for example, let's just say that I did not generate this line. I'm just going to manually delete it. I can do inline code. Oh, I think I deleted the whole file. I'm trying Control Z, and that's not working. All right, let me just recreate it. It's not the end of the world. It's the best part. So I'm just going to give it the same prompt. So go to package service, clear everything, same prompt, and let's hope it gives the same output. Yeah, close enough. Okay, pull this in, save it. Actually, in this case, this is even a better example. Oops, I need to save it. I'm going too fast. So main.py. Okay, in this case, you notice that it actually did not create that app run, did not create sort of an entry point. So here I can just do inline code generation. So I can just say create an entry point for this app. I can hit enter and it will actually create that. That's one way of doing it, and I can just hit tab to accept it. Or I can select this code. I can select this comment, right, or click on this bulb and just say generate code, which is basically the same thing. And then it will generate suggestions, which is basically that same line that it had created previously. So, and we're adding more smart actions to this. Another thing I want to show is just generate unit tests, which is like the most frequently asked thing. So I can select this, right click, generate unit tests, and it will generate a unit test based on this app.
Are you going to generate documentation?
Yes, I don't know if it does it on previous code. The way to do that is when you prompt it, just say add comments.
I mean, not to the code, but separate documentation about using the code that was written.
Yeah, I don't think I've done that, but yeah, I mean, I guess one way to do this is
Like
select
taking
this
a
whole
body
thing
of code,
and just
have it
say,
automatically generate the comments or
Not the comments.
documentation.
I want the docs, like for a user that's a developer that's going to consume this
Yeah.
library. How do I use it? What am I using?
actually, one of the one of the requests that we've gotten is create release notes.
Yeah.
Just self-creating. That would be one of the smart actions. I have not used it myself, so I don't really know. Yeah, I don't think it did a very good job on this one, but yeah, that's a good one. I should probably add it to my repertoire. Another thing you can do is, like, let's say you say, well, again, I'm just picking on this line because honestly, this is the most interesting line in this entire thing. Everything else is pretty normal. But I can do this. I can say explain this. So we'll go back to the explain this thing, which is like how do I do that? And I can ask, like, is there a better way to do this? I don't know. And let's just see. Maybe there isn't.
Know how to answer those.
Yeah, and it gave an example. Last time actually I did it when I was sitting over there. It actually gave a much better example. It says using the with session will actually close it, which was the right way to do that. In this case, it didn't. But there's ways to start communicating. We believe that pretty much this year or next year, every developer will have some sort of an assistant in the IDE, just like people use language servers and syntax highlighting and those types of things, right? And then just for the sake of time, what I didn't have is, how do I fix errors? And so let's say that I'm running this application now in my Kubernetes cluster, which I am. I can go to shipping, which is the application. It's all running, it's fine, but people are reporting errors. People are saying, hey, I'm not getting the product information. I can go to the logs. I can actually open these logs in a separate window so it's easier to see. I'm just going to close some of these things. And I can click on one of these errors. So like this is an error. Oops. This is an error message. And this is a lot going on, and maybe I don't understand this. I can just say explain this log entry, and it will open that Duet on the side. So the reason I'm showing you this is the idea is that console will become more and more smarter, and it will become more context aware. So depending upon which context you're in this case, I'm in Log Explorer, I can open that, and I can just start asking questions. And it actually gives a pretty good answer because I know what the error is. For example, here it says
The log entries were automatically generated as part of the code generation process, so you didn't have to do anything for that.
the log entry is just part of GKE product.
Oh,
yeah.
GKE,
Yeah,
okay.
because now it's running as a GKE pod, so now it's
Yeah,
just
yeah, yeah,
running.
yeah.
And I can also ask it to do something like help me fix. Oops, I don't think I'm typing. I need to type it here. Help me, fix this or fix this error. That's why I cut, copy, paste my prompts. And let's see what it says. Oh, can you provide me with the error message? So this is where I just need to copy, this error maybe like, let's just say this is the error. Half the time it just picks it, and the other time it doesn't. And then it tells me exactly, it just says, hey, it looks like your Cloud SQL admin API. To fix this error, you need to grant the Cloud SQL client role to the IAM principal, and then it tells you exactly how to do it. And you can even say, tell me how to do it in gcloud, and it'll do it that way. And the last thing I'll say is in the future, we will also have agents. So then you can say, do this on behalf of me. Currently, it's a lot more informational, and it's not proactive. And that's what agents will be able to do.